Okay, it is almost 4th of July. It is June 28th, Wednesday. Summer is in full throttle. Things are melting in the South. It is fun times. Lots of energy, lots of things going on, not pun intended, on the energy side. We have a great guest today. We're looking for an interesting conversation for the next hour. But before we get rolling, we're going to ask our own John Sibley Butler.
I was 8 years old and running with a dime in my hand to the bookstore to buy a paper for my old man. I would sit in his lap in that big old building, steer as we drove through town. He would shuffle my hair, say, son, take a good look around at your hometown. This is your hometown, your hometown, your hometown.
All right. Johnny, interesting. I've never heard you sing that before. So John Sibley Butler, how are you, sir?
I am doing extremely well. The weather is hot, but the activity is great here in the capital city of Texas as we prepare for the movement of technology and the government infusion of funds for the infrastructure of Texas. We're looking forward to have broadband in many, many small towns in Texas, and we're going to drive that by business opportunity and business activity. The greatest thing that I heard this week was I was in Killeen, Texas, and the guy said to me, well, you know that Killeen, Texas is now North Austin. And that really puts us into a regional kind of focus with a military base, by the way. And evidently, Elon Musk is busing people from Killeen, Texas, which is an hour and 40 minutes away, to his plant in Texas. And the other thing, of course, the big thing I think is the fact that how do we concentrate on the fact that we're doing this to enhance business enterprises? Okay. So the president talks a lot about broadband in America in general, and that's very, very good. But we also want to keep the idea that those same people can really, really have an impact on their small enterprises, how we do business in Texas, and that's very, very interesting. So as you know, we're getting all of the universities involved with the new infrastructure in the state of Texas. We still have the war going on over there, and that was a rebellion and not a coup, a military coup, as we know, come from within. And it's just announced all at once. I think that it was a rebellion, but it's certainly put a sort of spice on what's happening in Russia. If we look at the stock market, it's also up and down. And so we're in a place now where the infrastructure of America will have a great impact on the businesses and enterprises of the future. I talked to a friend of mine that I helped a long time ago. He is making cars now, and he's selling them electric cars very, very well. So this is what I tell people. I said, well, people tell me on the one hand to save electricity because we are in a heat wave. But on the other hand, Andre Cavallo tell me to go buy an electric car. So I don't know which way to go. How can on the one hand, they say we got to save electricity just when it gets hot because of the heat and the grid becomes unstable. But then they want me to go buy an electric car at the same time. But that tells us, as you know, we've talked about it, that for us to continue with the grid stuff, when you plug in an automobile, it's not like plugging in a toaster. So we look forward to putting business at the very, very center of everything. We look forward to the world becoming more humanitarian. We have to really, really look at what's going on in Europe, and we got to get through this, whatever it's going to be, this election. We have no Americans. We just have people who are Democrats and Republicans, and we have no Americans that's running. So I think it's very, very interesting. So that's my world.
All right. Great insights. they're wondering what's going on with the weather up north. Llewellyn King, how are you, sir?
I'm very well, personally. The weather is extremely unstable. It's sort of varying between sunshine and little patches of rain, but not extensive, and very occasional thunderstorm. But it's definitely unstable, and it may be somewhat complicated, at least the atmosphere, by smoke from Canada, which is due to arrive soon. And of course, most of the northern tier states are now affected by smoke from the out of control wildfires in Canada, which are just an indication of the future. The heat in Texas, the wildfires in Canada. No longer can you believe that that global warming is not a reality, or it's certainly that very strange things are happening in the atmosphere and to the climate, and we have to live with that. It's going to cause considerable economic hardship to some people. For example, there's an area in California that is flooded. It was a lake. It is a lake again, but in the interim, it was a very, very, very productive piece of agricultural land. That's going to have an impact on the cost of vegetables and pistachios in particular, if you're an eater of pistachios, across the country. These are major things. We're looking at a summer in which we, by the national energy, the national energy supply may run short. We may not have enough electricity. The prognosis is not good. That we will have blackouts, we will have brownouts, and of course we will have continued aberrant weather. This is a very large issue. It's going to bring home all of the environmental issues to become daily discussion topics this summer.
Yeah, well,
it's challenging.
Yeah, so I think it's really apropos that we have Giri Iyer with us today, because what he does and his company does is make things work better. So we're going to get into that in a moment. But before we do, I want to share my screen and show you guys what's going on with the grid in Texas. So this is a screen of ERCOT. This is our Texas Independent System Operator. And here are grid and market conditions, a bunch of screens, and I'll just come back to show you what I'm looking at. So this is the ERCOT demand and supply. And it's 2 o'clock, and this is all historical now. And now we're heading into the forecast. And you can see something very interesting. The peak this week, the last 7 days, the peak has been hovering between 87 and 88. And look how the peak is forecasted around 7 o'clock to hit 99 megawatts. So Texas used to be a 75 gigawatt region, 75,000 megawatts. It's almost 100,000 megawatts. Is in the last 4 years, the demand on the grid has increased 25% on peak. I mean, this seems to be, the challenge of the journey of the success of Texas. And so it's interesting, right? And you can see here that the operating reserves are 7,000 megawatts, just in case, things don't go well. They're on standby. You got here the system demand load curve. You got these are the pricing spots where price is calculated in Texas. You can see the mix of all the production by different fuel types. Solar, wind, hydro, power storage, natural gas, coal, and nuclear. You can see here the performance of wind and solar. Right. And interestingly enough, you can see here the pricing. So see, the day started at $23 per megawatt, sometimes starts around 20, 18. And then if things get heated up, Right now, the price just a minute ago closed at 22, but it is forecasted later in the afternoon that it will peak and go all the way to 80 bucks, perhaps, right? Sometimes it goes all the way as high as 300, 400, even a couple of days ago, it was in 2000. So we'll see what happens today. This is just forecasting, which could change dramatically. But given all that, Giri, and the fact that we, and you are the VP of Corporate Development at Sentient Energy, and you're welcome to introduce your company a little bit and give us a history. Given all that, Giri, help us understand why the grid operators should be paying more attention to what you are offering to make this challenge become easier.
Well, first of all, I just wanted to thank CMG and this August group, John, Llewellyn, and yourself for inviting us again. My name is Giri Iyer. I do run the corporate development function at Sentient Energy, which is part of Koch Enterprises. And my role, we focus on some regulatory, guidance on what is happening at a federal level or a state level, and how does it impact our customers, which is the regulated investor-owned utility or public power. And in addition to that, I also work on, alliances, strategic alliances with ecosystem partners, and then some M&A. Clearly, we and our parent companies at Koch are bullish on the energy transition plans, and there are plans for us to invest in exciting companies and technology. So that's the background, if you will, Andres. The question is a fascinating one, right? I think particularly when you start showing the ERCOT dashboard of right now, what is happening on the grid. What we bring to the table, before I kind of go there, I did want to agree with the overall premise of what you and John were talking about. I think I saw an IEA report that said that the total need for energy is going to go up 3x by 2050. 3x. So when you said 25% in the last 4 years, if we start projecting to 2050, the grid needs to be able to handle roughly 300% of what it's handling right now, which means the state of Texas should be somewhere between 250 and 300 gigawatts. That is a lot of capacity building. Don't we all agree? Yep. It's exciting. It is exciting. It's what is needed, and it's what is needed to accommodate new solar, new wind, new microgrids, new batteries. The characteristic of the grid itself is changing, as you all know better than I do. But if you will, it's a growth opportunity for all companies, ourselves included, and all investors, ourselves included. That's the first point I would make, Andres. The second point is, I know the last time, and I want to take you back to February 2021, and a lot of analysis has been done in what happened in Texas during that once in a 100-year ice storm that went through. It was an outlier among outliers, right? How do you do a contingency planning for something that extreme? I believe, and please, I'm looking to be corrected, that there was 6 gigawatts of renewable energy, not interconnected, but available, built, sitting on the sidelines in the state of Texas. So that remains the one concern I have, that we need to put a lot of emphasis on making sure we don't have stranded DER assets, but interconnected DER assets. That's the one piece I would say. The second piece is we need to have a cautionary note before we retire old generation assets, especially given the backdrop of how much growth that we are seeing. Right? We all know that we want to make sure that we are moving to a different economy, if you will, with more renewables, et cetera. But given this load growth that we are expecting, it would be prudent on us to not switch off available generation resource prematurely without having a good handle on what's coming in the next few years.
Right.
bringing this now back down to Sentient Energy, and I will quote a dear friend of mine who was in a conference a few weeks ago, and he was on the panel, Michael Peason from the DOE. So I'll kind of blame him for saying what we loved hearing. I think distribution is on its way to becoming as important as the transmission grid.
Mhm.
A lot of these DER assets are actually going to interconnect on 69 kV and below. And that is what is exciting for Sentient Energy. That is why we are so excited here and now to be who we are. And for the benefit of those who have joined us on the discussion here today, we are the world's most comprehensive suite of overhead, underground, and grid edge, extremely high fidelity sensing, monitoring, and grid edge control. So it's a combination of sensors plus software plus analytics that's available. And we're talking about 7.8 kilohertz resolution on the overhead side and 15 kilohertz resolution on the underground side. We think, and by the way, we have a built-in ability to track current direction reversal because there is a growing concern of backflow when you're now talking about the ER interconnecting. So whenever I hear about, solar injections or microgrids kind of selling into the grid or vehicle to grid, that's changing the grid reliability and power quality. That's changing the grid dynamics. That again makes us excited because we have solutions today to help. And then obviously we have a rich roadmap and an appetite to talk with our customers and learn more about what more can we do to help them. What I always constantly tell people is one of the things that our industry is known for is every project seems to take years, if not decades.
Mhm.
We call ourselves a fast time to value solution. The average feeder can be instrumented by Sentient Energy Solutions with a trained line worker in 1 hour. So the average 5,000 meter muni or co-op can be enterprise-wide live with 100% visibility on their networks, overhead, underground, and grid edge in 3 business days. So while the industry constantly talks about that's going to take a long time. So what does take a long time? Transmission permits take a long time, and then transmission build-outs take even more time, right?
Mhm.
So during that time, when new transmission capacity is going to take a long time to build, yes, grid enhancing technologies have been outlined, and dynamic line rating, et cetera, have been outlined on the transmission side.
Mhm.
Let's not ignore where the people live.
Yeah.
Let's not ignore the complexity of the distribution circuit, which has typically not been stuff that folks looked at too much. But we take great pride in working with our partners and working with our customers in making sure we are the scalable, standards-based, future-proof, fast time to value solution.
Got it.
Well, look, what's exciting about your comments is the public-private relationship with the private enterprise, with Koch. That is, one thing we've done here is we talk about the grid in terms of the industry itself, but we've never talked about private enterprises or private foundations that really are interested enough to lend their support to how we study the grid, how analyses are done, how we bring on new technology onto the grid, and et cetera, et cetera. And I also think in that connection that we are just becoming, quote, aware of, quote, the problems with the grid in the general population, something we've talked about forever. Talk to me some about how do you think private enterprise or private foundations can continue to enhance the grid here going forward? Because we used to think of just the city of Austin supporting because we own the grid here, or and et cetera. How do you see how private enterprise is playing a big part in the future?
John, that's such a fantastic question, and thank you for that. So here's a couple of things for us to kind of discuss, right? Number one is, if you are a large industrial customer, and we are, right? You know that if you have a large industrial plant And we make glass, and glass is a highly energy intensive manufacturing industry. We are in the oil refining business, we are in the paper and pulp business, and we have multiple other businesses which are fairly energy intensive. Customers like these, while we do work with the utilities, we also have some level of self-reliance that we build into our CapEx, which is, if everything went wrong, I should have a 50 megawatt, 100 megawatt cogeneration plant right there next to my manufacturing plant. And this has been around for the longest time, right? So I think we are becoming a lot more aware of the importance of that thought process that we had, and we are beginning to grow from there. Our utility customers focus a lot of their time and attention in trying to understand the needs of, how they call the C&I, right? Commercial and industrial class customers, airports, universities, hospitals, schools, large commercial malls, what have you, industrial buildings, commercial buildings, right? So data centers is another classic example of extremely energy intensive things that are needed. I mean, Andres, you know better than anybody else in the state of Austin, how many in the city of Austin, how many data centers are growing up. All the large information technology companies are not only aware that as they build data centers, they're going to need a lot of juice to make sure the data center is humming, because nobody wants the internet to go down. They kind of think it miraculously stays afloat. But if you peel enough layers of the onion, you have to make sure there's a high availability disaster recovery solution in place. And these great technology companies, Amazon, Google, IBM, HP, and I'm sorry if I'm missing anybody, don't mean to, they all have extremely sophisticated plans in place for a resilient infrastructure for the data centers, but that also now includes local cogeneration, solar on the roofs of buildings, batteries, what have you. And then if they start now thinking about a fleet of electric vehicles, or the guys who have a lot of box trucks coming back and forth, to be able to say, for example, I learned something a couple of weeks ago regarding school buses. And I did not want to embarrass the company I was speaking to, but it was wonderfully educational for me. School buses are most busy from 6 a.m. to say 10 a.m. And then once the kids are in school, they're kind of in a wait mode until they deliver the kids safely back home, say between 3 and 5. The rest of the time, they're kind of available. Yeah. Imagine that now as an EV resource, and there is funding in the IIJA bill for that. And there is probably 450,000 school buses here in the United States, right? So there is a capability for us to build in that flexibility, provided we interconnect, right? Provided we interconnect and make sure everybody is willing to understand that the interconnection is not free. The upgrade of the infrastructure, whether it is a substation or reconductoring or new lines, new feeders, whatever that is not free. It needs to be paid for. I think, I think the only market difference between the regulated side and the C&I customers is us private folks like to move much faster. If we are able to show a clear business case to our superiors, they will cut us a check because they want us to move much more decisively. And we are able to cut a portion of that check to the utility and say, go build me a substation here, or go modernize this feeder here. There are examples of states where, the private sector is actually able to cut a check to the utility to go build out an infrastructure. Sorry. Yeah. Sorry for the long answer, John. Yeah.
No, that's wonderful. So I think what's happening here is that I have been gone from a rate payer to a digital partner. In terms of how you look at and think about the grid becoming the biggest machine and part of the entire industry in America. And I think in terms of how we think about the world and the general population, that's new. That's new to me. That's new to people who just turn their lights on. And what a wonderful idea to think that the private sector would take a great interest and whether or not the lights will come on. Now, as you know, with hospitals and et cetera, we like to put them on a certain kind of grid. But for me to say that the private sector, the big companies are just as concerned with the grid, just like they were concerned with getting highways, if you will, and et
Absolutely.
cetera. It's very good. Thank you, sir.
Absolutely, sir.
Giri, I'd like to ask you, if we're going to see a threefold increase in demand, I haven't heard anything which will suggest how we're going to meet it. Everything I've heard suggests incremental improvement. And even if we go to using that enormous number of school buses as a great national battery, there's huge, expensive infrastructure built out to build the charging and to incorporate those into the grid at a time when the demands on infrastructure are not only financial, they're also supply, engineering, and talent. The pressure is huge if you're going to actually even increase the supply of electricity by half, let alone if you're going to increase it 3 times by 2050. It just doesn't seem to me, and I'm not an engineer, but I've watched this for a long time, how we're going to pull this off.
You know, I think I love history, and I'm a student of history, and all I know is there have been times in civilizations when massive opportunities present themselves where most civilizations are going to look and say, we don't have enough trained resources to go do this. There is no easy button to this solution, and nor is there a one single silver bullet, right? We don't have enough trained IT people. We don't have enough trained OT people. But the good news, and I think the big difference, and please hold me accountable to this, I think in the last 10 years, I have seen a marked difference in the general population's interest in the energy sector. They call it by many different names. They may not necessarily call it the electrical grid, if you will, but they may be interested in climate, they may be interested in sustainability, they may be interested in EVs, they may be interested in solar on the roof, but there has to be a grassroots movement with more youngsters trained who come up to meet the demand, because the demand is absolutely monstrous in front of us. Pretty much every customer that I'm talking to is talking about a human talent shortage. Trained, experienced folks who know what they're doing is in shortage. It will take time to get that grassroots stuff going, to have enough fresh, new talent, diverse talent, folks from the other sex and other minorities have to come in, and some of them have to become specialized in project management or line workers or electrical or wiring or civil or even pure IT. The beauty of the grid is a very multi-dimensional problem. It is just not an electrical engineer domain. So I think the human issue is the first one, and I think the infrastructure bill addresses that. And hopefully we are, as a society, able to attract fresh new talent to join us in this project. And there are jobs in multiple utilities, jobs in multiple companies. And as the money starts beginning to flow from IIJA, I think we need to, and we will see a boom of youngsters enrolling in college, enrolling in specialized technicals to go do this. And then from a manufacturing of all the products that we know of today that we need, and then of the product that we have yet to design, there's no shortcut again around that. I think companies like us are eager to invest the money so long as we can see a profitable growth in an uptake of our solutions, right? So
I still don't see how we're going to get from here. Right today, there's a shortage of transformers. You can't get any. If you're going to triple the electric production, you're going to need an awful lot of just transformers, let alone everything else. And there's going to be a great competition for what are the primary needs. Will it be people who want to use school buses as a national battery? Will it be people who want to put in more solar power? Will it be people who want to put in more DER, which is probably one of the inevitable solutions, but not an absolute solution. And there are those who may start contemplating what happens if you don't get from here to there. What happens if you don't have sufficient electricity? You're going to have some kind of sharing or some different way of approaching this. During the height of the energy crisis, we looked at, I worked very closely with Jim Schlesinger, the first Secretary of Energy, but going back to the time when he was at the Atomic Energy Commission, they worked very closely on looking at these options, and they weren't very attractive. But what did save everything was technology plus a new fiscal order, particularly a regulatory order. But it doesn't seem as though these were two things that changed everything. But because of the complexity of the grid and the huge number of pressures at so many points in the system, it doesn't seem that that kind of evolution will take place. And you said history. Well, immediately I think of something like the construction of the Liberty ships, where you had, but it was a single part of the almost a single part of it was able to be concentrated. There was a huge concentration. When we look at the grid, we're not looking at any one concentration because there isn't any one solution. It's multiple solutions to a multiplex problem.
So let me jump in. Let me jump in real quick, add some color for the audience. So there are roughly 500,000 yellow buses in the United States. And if they were to be converted to electric, they would need to house anywhere from a 100 kilowatt hour battery to a 500 kilowatt hour battery to have enough range because of the weight. So let's say they all have a 500 kilowatt hour battery. Again, we're making things up here quickly, but you can do the math. So 500,000 yellow buses times 500,000 watts per battery hour in the bus gives you 250 gigawatts hours needed to charge all the buses at the same time. That is 25% of the entire production of the grid in the United States. Now, it's not going to happen like that. It could be scheduled. There will be time of use pricing and all these things, but you can see where the growth that I was sharing about Texas going from 75 gigawatts to 100 gigawatts in a few years is just on the way up. Now, Giri, let's go back to a little bit of, solution technology. You can dumb it down as you like, but
sure.
In the power grid, in the transmission side of things, in order for the grid to hum and function well, we use something called phasor measurement units.
Yes.
What do your sensors do compared to that for the distribution grid? And let's say, as you were saying, if you take your technology, you put it in one feeder, a feeder is usually taking care of about 1,000 homes or so per substation. Well, give us a little sense of the magic that goes there compared to the big power grid versus what needs to happen.
No, I think, and thank you for that question. And I think you use the right word there, right? Phasers or PMUs, if you will, for those of us who want to get a little wonky. But the idea is the problems of today cannot be solved by the solutions of yesterday. Our solution was never designed to be just a fault current indicator, because remember, the best fault is one that you actually avoid.
Right.
So the resolution, why go measure something 256 samples per cycle or 15,000 times a second? Why do that? Right? I mean, we call our solutions intelligent sensors for a reason, right? If we measure true voltage everywhere, we would be a PMU. And by the way, some of our products are there right now. We actually do measure voltage on the LV side, and we have voltage sensing and voltage control systems. But the point being to be able to anticipate capacity issues, to anticipate reliability issues. And it's not just measuring current, it's measuring E-field, measuring conductor temperature, measuring, in case of the overhead solution, we're actually even measuring physical movement of the conductor because of an accelerometer inside it and current direction change. And then if you have all of this, and if you have access to enough of this data, we are now talking about treating and managing the distribution circuit just like you manage the transmission circuit. The beautiful thing is that with enough data, you should and can expect your grid to be better, so that the harder discussion can be had to Llewellyn's question, which is, we don't recommend you interconnect on this particular circuit right here, right now, because you may actually cause more damage than benefit. There is an interconnect fee. Now, we can talk about the fairness of that interconnect fee vis-a-vis a complete redoing of that feeder infrastructure or even the substation infrastructure, and who pays for it. And I do want to go back to Llewellyn's challenge. Is a very fair one. Typically, many large problems, when we do business cases, and believe me, I get beaten up every day to do a better business case for any one idea I come up with, Llewellyn. Typically, large business problems are profitable business problems for the private sector. Large problems that need large amounts of money thrown at them to do large R&D are generally good business cases where private sector will move. Private sector should move, and that's been the quintessential beauty of private companies, is when we see large opportunities, we will not hesitate to invest if we know there is a path forward for profitable growth. But going back to what Sentient Energy does, today we are at 45 kV and below, and we see a need to potentially go up to 69 kV and stuff. But our premise is there is going to be so much action on the distribution circuit. There are other companies already in the transmission side, and transmission also, we need to do congestion management and better management, for which there are solutions that are available. One doesn't replace the other. It's actually an all of the above mandate that we need to execute to. But I would call us, the company that was purposefully built for a reason, is there is going to be an expectation of better harmonic management, better power quality management. And eventually people will start talking about backflow issues and making sure that incentives are not just for reliability and things like SAIDI and CMI, but incentives are for power quality, and then incentives for taking care of that congestion or that backflow issue, making sure it doesn't happen.
Right.
Right. So
Yeah,
I think there are new business models. Sorry, John. There are new business models that will incentivize companies to innovate in that area. Sorry, John, you wanted to say something, sir.
Yeah, well, let's blend the data analysis with some of the history and with some of the human resources. Back when I was in graduate school at the University of Chicago, we created something called finance from the equations from physics.
Yeah.
And so some of the best finance people now are physicists, right? Because they can write the equation. Now, I really love the idea, but the problem with finance is that it doesn't have the human activity there. I mean, we will always have crises because we don't have the sociological, psychological elements in the equations. And remember that people will always try to beat the system. Now, having said that, it's what we have. Let's also talk about the human resources. When we go back to one of the greatest, history marks in America with auto and steel and manufacturing, they didn't wait on the colleges and university to train. Ford Motor Company trained all of their engineers themselves.
That's right.
U.S. Steel trained their engineers themselves. They created towns to train the engineering themselves. And of course, going to college to pick them up, it's sort of a new phenomena. You went to college to become a college person, not necessarily to learn how to do anything. So my father said, go to college, join a fraternity, meet a lot of people, then decide on what you know how to learn. So my question is, when it comes to the human resources tradition, can we do that same kind of thing when we say there's a lack of people in certain areas? Can private enterprise jump in and do the training of engineers, or jump in and do those kind of things that we did in the 1940s and the 1930s? Because we did not wait on the universities to train. That's a thought I have. And so you can comment on the algorithms that we have that would definitely allow you to manage how things move, as we do a lot of stuff. But going back to the finance model, how do you handle the human element? You just say it, you cannot do that. So can you comment on those things, especially the human resources thing?
No, I think you give a very good example of how responsible private companies moving with the urgency once they have locked and loaded on the business case move. Ford and GM trained people right out of school, right? And that's how the automobile revolution took place. I think it's going to take something of that scale right now. And I've spoken to enough utilities where they are beginning to think along these lines. In fact, just a couple of weeks ago, and I wanted to give a shout out to a dear friend, Mark Gabriel, who hosted some of us at United Power. They gave us a fantastic presentation on grid safety. And believe me, they are training emergency workers and fire, and first responders on the importance of grid safety, especially as new folks come into the industry. They need to know the grid is something you approach with a lot of training and caution and safety first kind of a mentality, right? That's very, very important for us to do. But John, I think the onus is on all of us to innovate, not just private companies, on all companies, including the regulated IOUs, the services companies, some of them may be on the call here right now, and public power to innovate. How many of us have woken up, I remember my early days and said, God, I want to go work for an electric utility. If that is going to have to be the opportunity for us to now make our industry more desirable, because frankly, which other industry has so much opportunity in front of it?
Yeah, and speaking of that, one of the things that we've learned when we had any issue or energy issues in the old days, we just went to where the source of the energy was. We had windmills, we had water mills, right? I have a deck now in front of me, and they want to put all the data centers where the energy is. So if it's propane coming out the ground or whatever coming out the ground, just put the data center right there with no transportation. So I think you're right. That's the kind of creativity it would take. But remember that the grid is just coming in our eyesight. And with college students, nobody's ever said, I think I want to go work on the grid. And that's what has to change.
That's what has to change.
This is interesting. The airlines are beginning to train their own pilots, which was always done in Europe and never done in the US because it relied on people coming out of the military and private pilots who started young enough and showed enough talent. Now they're training their own, which is something which is worth noting. Because you're talking about doing the same thing in the utility space. And they're being very creative even now. For example, Detroit Edison, I think, or DTE calls itself now, is using a particular class of former prisoner for vegetation control. And when I wrote about this, several other utilities expressed interest in this. There certainly is a talent shortage. And we're going to see a huge crunch around the utilities in materials, talent, and simply bodies to do the work.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, I think, like I said, no company is exempt from their need to now attract new talent. No company is exempt. It is a challenge for all of us to go do that. And frankly, the only thing that is holding us back, is I think the utilities are waiting to see how their grant applications are going to be reviewed, how the money is going to flow. I don't know whether you guys saw this, going back to the broadband funding that was just announced. Texas just won $3.3 billion. So I'm very, very excited for the 70 munis and co-ops that are in the great state of Texas.
And we don't think that was enough. We don't know why we give it to Vermont.
And again, I don't think all the money needs to come from one particular place. I think, if you're given a business case, the money comes from different sources. It doesn't always have to come from one place. I'll leave it there.
Sure.
And speaking of business cases, let me ask you, I know we're running out of time, but I do the CNBC Disruptive Technologies representing 512 CMG and the university. And you see a lot of new technologies. You see a lot of new ideas. What are some of the ideas that you've seen, especially getting energy back on the grid with the legacy technology that we're dealing with now? We're dealing with the legacy technology that hadn't changed really tremendously in lots of years. What's some of the great ideas that you've seen that would get the energy back on the grid from the houses, from what's happening behind the meter, rather than in front of the meter and those kind of things.
Yeah, instead of speaking in hypotheticals, John, I'll go on my soapbox and give you a selfish sales spiel here. 3 years ago, we acquired Varentech, which was the genius of Dr. Deepak Divan from Georgia Tech. And some may argue that the solution, while extremely innovative, was a little bit ahead of its time, but that's the genius of Deepak, right? Our solution today monitors on the secondary side of a distribution transformer voltage 32 times per cycle, and we are able to inject 1 kVAR to adjust the power quality and make sure that the VAR injection makes sure that the voltage profile at the tail end of the distribution circuit stays within the 120 plus or minus, 4 or 5 band. That is an example of a very simple capacitive adjustment of grid edge voltage. And one of the benefits of that, John, which was tested out and proven by my friends at NREL, is if you aggregated the adjustment done by all these devices, and this phenomenon is called conservation voltage reduction, and you can speak to folks way smarter than me on that topic, they were able to aggregate that and show that at a substation level, we were actually demonstrating a savings of 1.5 megawatt or 1.5 negawatt, if you will. And during peak load times, that was a peak shaving of between 3 and 5%, not insignificant. And this was really pioneering work done by Excel Energy. It is just one example of a device, clear selfish plug to my own company. And I can tell you that we are going somewhere else, but the idea of waiting and telling the control system something is wrong is so circa 1990s.
Right.
We believe in grid edge monitoring and control, and we are able to, in a matter of a few microseconds, fix the issue, and then next integrity poll from the SCADA system, we just tell them, oh, we saw a problem, we already fixed it, FYI. That's
Giri, real quick, EV sales are through the roof. The F-150 Lightning, the Tesla models. Tesla is opening a second version of their Gigafactory here. Solar rooftops are happening everywhere. Your technology must be in the top of the fingertips of everybody. Tell us what's happening at Sentient Energy in the next 90 days.
So what I can tell you is we are one of the few companies that have realized that one of the best ways to deliver fast time to value is not just pay lip service to the cloud, but genuinely build a solution that is cloud native from the ground up. Right? So almost like a Netflix or an Amazon Prime,
for the grid.
Right, for the grid. And then cyber secure, certified. By the way, Koch has got investments in Dragos, which is as cybersecurity goes, the leader in that space. And then we are working with some of the cloud providers like, Amazon to make sure we can offer that elasticity. But that for us is a very significant investment we have made because we want to walk the talk, right? So we are able to tell the utility, you know what? You have to deploy 0 IT resources from your side if you will just get over the, oh my God, can OT be in the cloud hump?
And do you have, Giri, anywhere that you can showcase, perhaps Texas State Cedar, this self-healing grid on the cloud that you're promoting?
I would love to come and meet you again, Andres, and talk about how I'm going to become part of Cedar. I know that's where you were going. But we do have customers and we do have case studies where people are actually confidently and with good success now beginning to deploy our solutions on the grid edge in the cloud. We obviously want to see a lot more of that. And I think industry luminaries like yourself, Andres and John and Llewellyn have to lean on the industry and say, it's going to be okay. You have only small companies like Amazon and Microsoft with their $15 billion cybersecurity budgets, but they'll take care of your cloud because guess what? The DoD has gone to the cloud, and I suspect they have a little bit of sensitive information as well. So if the United States government itself and the DoD and the Pentagon can deploy the cloud, I think the grid needs to get comfortable with it. And I was in a conference a few weeks ago where there was even a gentleman from FERC who came in and said, oh yeah, there is no real reason at all why these solutions cannot be on the cloud.
Well, absolutely. The
I'd
grid.
like to ask a question here, if I might.
Sure.
And that is, we haven't mentioned artificial intelligence and how this might affect the future.
So I want to be very clear about, not using buzzwords, right? So when people say cloud, I told you that we are walking the talk. Same thing, right? One of the benefits of having well over 200 million waveforms in a machine learning enabled library, which is all unique waveforms between the substation and the meter, Llewellyn, is we have a team of data scientists who are now at a point where we are calling the utility, in some cases, 2 weeks before a failure and say, in that particular span of that overhead line, you now have a vegetation contact issue. And they say, no, I don't see an outage in my SCADA. Oh no, we know that. An outage is after the fact. We are actually calling them 2 weeks before the failure happened, Llewellyn. So are we using AI/ML to do that? Yes, sir, we are. But again, it's the walk the talk thing. I'll put in again a selfish plug. There is a customer that I won't name because they are confidential at this stage, but we worked on an analytics project with them. 20 out of 20 validations that they did. Every time we picked up the phone and they said, you know what, we're going to suspend our disbelief and we're going to roll a truck because there is no fault. Remember,
Yes.
it's a paradigm shift. What do you mean you want me to roll a truck? There's nothing wrong. There is going to be something wrong. That's AI/ML at work. So that's why I keep saying the way Sentient Energy wants to do this, and it's the hard road, right? It's the road less taken. It's the hard road, is to basically convince the utilities to work with us, beat us up into shape, so we are a better company today than we were yesterday. And they were so happy. They said, that's 20 on 20. Are we happy with that? Hell no. I want to have much more customers come, use us, use the AI/ML and the waveforms to basically say, that's a vegetation failure that's going to happen there, and that's an equipment failure that's going to happen there. What is the point, Llewellyn, of saying, I flew a satellite and basically was able to see the wildfire more clearly, or I flew a drone and therefore I was able to see the top of the circuit more clearly after the fact? Now, there are use cases, but that's the only option you've got. We would rather try and be proactive or ideally predictive. But the way we do that at Sentient Energy is absolutely through AI/ML, sir.
Yeah, and what you're saying is that, as we've said on the program before, the grid is where computers were 60 years ago. So Microsoft can say, look, you will have a problem with this soft patch, with this, here's the patch. So you're creating the analog of predictability with your data scientist. Let me just say the best data scientist is Rajiv Garg. He's at besides me, of course, he's right there at Emory, and we're published together, and he can write equations that you need written. And right there at Emory, I sent you his email address. Be sure to contact him because you need him. He's the best. There is RAGIVGANG. He's a great colleague. But I think what you're saying is, give me the predictability. Just think analytical here of what Microsoft could do when they had all of the data about everybody who had their computer. So they could say, you will have a problem here. You need to patch this. You will do this in the future. So that's the power of prediction. And as the old book goes, the signal and the noise.
Absolutely.
What's correct, right, and what's not correct. So congratulations. I think data always allow us to see the world better.
Thank you. And I think, like I said, we're only getting started, John. I mean, we still see ourselves as a young, exciting startup, 10 years into it. And there's a lot more to learn, particularly as the grid starts seeing a lot more reverse current flow come online in the next decade and two. So
good to hear. Good to hear. Giri, I know that there's a lot of stuff that you guys continue to do and grow. Tell me where do you see things right now with the economy? Just give me a glimpse. Are your projects accelerating? Do you have a larger pipeline, or are things steady? What is 2023 looking like?
I think 2023, I think we had a little bit of a supply chain hiccup. I think Lowland talked about that, particularly because of the transformer shortage. And now I think people are waking up to the idea that, oh my God, a transformer business case is a good one.
Mhm.
Hopefully private sector is acting on that. But I think from our side, we are very bullish about what the next 12, 18 months look like. I think as soon as the awards start rolling out, and we are beginning to see that roll out already now, especially the formula grants, I'm very bullish of what's going to happen on the other side of 4th of July. So, and the funnel is great. We are a better company than we were a year ago in terms of the maturity of our analytics now. So we are looking forward to, doing our share of helping this grid become more modernized.
Brilliant. Gentlemen, final thoughts.
I think that you got a great opportunity ahead of you. I think your biggest issue would be the legacy and how utilities make money and how they might see how that might interfere with them making money. And I think if you can show them the relationship between data, predictability, and the bottom line, you are, as we say, in the great state of Louisiana. And by the way, LSU did win the national championship at baseball. And I'm surprised that we did not start the program off with that with my alma mater. I'm just shocked. But I think it's a great, great business, Marla. But you have to show your customers on the utility side that moving away from legacy technology will not affect your bottom line.
Amen to that.
I think that's the issue you will have in the future. But I think Professor Rajiv will help you out if you go to him at Emory University. Okay.
I will go to him.
Brilliant, Llewellyn.
Next few months will be very rough indeed. The extreme weather anticipated. The Pacific is warmer than normal. The Atlantic is warmer than normal. That means aberrant weather. We've had projections from all the reliable prognosticators that we're going to have electric shortages this summer. That means the politicians will get into the act, and you'll have all kinds of politicians putting up ideas of what should be done to enhance grid reliability and the supply of electricity going forward. They won't necessarily help, but they will certainly do what Giri suggested, make the public very aware of the impending crisis. And I think he and his company will prosper enormously.
Thank you, sir.
Absolutely. So before we go away, let me share real quick and remind everybody, inviting you to the Digital 360 Summit. It's going to be at Texas State University at Star Park in San Marcos, Texas, just 25 minutes south of Boston, September 26th through the 29th. And it's going to be a jam-packed 4 days on network, cities, mobility, energy, water, buildings, infrastructure, sensors, platforms, cloud, analytics, machine learning, AI. We're going to have some superstars. We got multiple mayors attending. We got multiple CEOs of utilities attending. Looking forward to it. These are some of the companies that spoke and sponsored last year. And we can see Sentient Energy there. Thank you for being there last year. Looking forward to have you again. And then Texas State University, the CEDAR program moves on. The 64 megawatt solar farm RFP is about to come out. We're going to be building our Smart Energy Utilities Lab, and we are opening our Smart Buildings Lab. Smart Networks Lab has been augmented to 1,000 square feet on the NOC, and it has multiple antennas covering 6 technologies across. And we want to thank Texas State for sponsoring the Digital Roundtable. Giri, thank you for being with us today. Always a pleasure. God bless. And John, take us away.
Operator, why don't you help me make this call? See the number on the match is old and fading. She living in LA with my best old ex-friend Ray. Gosh, she says she knew well and sometimes hated. Isn't that the way they say it goes? Well, let's forget all that. Give me the number if you can find it, so I can call just to tell them I'm fine and to show 'em of the blow. I learned to take it well. I only wish my words could convince myself that it just wasn't real.
Thank you, guys. I gotta run.
Okay,
So
take
we
care.
gotta cut it short today. Sorry about